In this demonstration, I'll show you how you can use Polybase to load data within Azure SQL Data Warehouse. To begin with, what we'll do is go to Management Studio. And within Management Studio, we have a number of tables here. And I'm going to delete the dates table in the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And once this is deleted, we're going to use Polybase to pull the data from a file within an Azure Blob Store, and then use code to create a new date table within the Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So in order to do that, we're going to switch back to Visual Studio. So within Visual Studio, the first step we will do is create an external data source. Now, the external data source, we can give it any name. In this case, I'm calling it Azure Storage. And this is for the type equal Hadoop. Now, essentially, the location is really important because what it's doing, it's referring to a location called Windows Azure Storage Blob. It's looking at the data container that I created in a previous, that I referred to in a previous demonstration. And the data container is held in a storage account called CTO storage account. And this is within .blob.core.windows.net. So we've got the path to the location. To connect up to that Azure Blob Storage, we're going to make use of a credential called Azure Storage Credential. And the Azure Storage Credential is what we created in a previous demo up here. So it's got the same name as this. So let's highlight the code to create the external data source for Azure Storage. Execute this command. And the command is completed successfully. Now we've got the external data source defined, we can then tell Azure SQL Data Warehouse the file format that we're referring to within the Azure Blob Storage. And to do this, we make use of the external file format command. And we use the create external file format. This time we're going to call it text file, as you can see here. And the format type is a delimited text. And we're specifying the format options with a field terminator equal to a comma. So we're defining that commas are the definition of field termination. Let's highlight this code and execute it. And we've now created the external file format called text file. Now we're going to create an external table. And the external table will create an external table called dim_date_to_external. And this will hold the metadata about the columns and the data types, as you can see here. And what we're saying is we are specifying the location of the root of the container that we're connecting to. So in this case, we're looking at the root of the data container within the Azure Blob Storage. The data source is pointing to the Azure Storage external data source that we've created. And the file format is pointing to the text file external file format that we've created. So what we'll do is we will highlight this code. We will execute the code. And after a couple of seconds, the actual external table is created. Now, the external table itself doesn't hold the data, but we can query it. So here is a count of all the records from the dim_date_to_external. If we execute that, we'll get a record returned of 2,192, which is the number of rows within that particular file in the Azure Blob Storage. And you can seek confirmation of that here. And we can indeed actually query all the data within that external table. But as I say, the external table contains metadata. It's actually pulling the data through from the file itself. and there's confirmation of the rows. Now what we can do is we can make use of a CTAS statements, and with that CTAS statements, we are going to create a table. I'm going to call it dbo.dates, and there's a custom column stored index in there, and we're specifying the distribution of round robin. But after the as clause, we are doing a select statement against the DIMDate2 external table. If we execute this query, after a few seconds, the command will complete successfully, where the DIMDate table has been created as a result of querying information from DIMDate2 external. Now, it is worth mentioning when you're loading data like this, you do want to create the statistics on the new data that you've loaded. So in this case, we're creating statistics on the date key, the quarter, and the month column. So we'll execute that. That's completed successfully. And finally, what I'm going to do is switch to Management Studio. And within Management Studio, in Object Explorer here, you can see that there's just the business hierarchies and equity time series data. I will right-click and refresh this, and we now have the dbo.dates table in, and we can select the rows from that particular table where a query will be executed and return back data from the data that we've just loaded by using Polybase. There you go. So what you've seen in this demonstration is how you can load data into an Azure SQL data warehouse using Polybase.